Hello and welcome to this series of videos in which we're going to explore ways in which the principles of classical harmony can be applied in a practical way to help you develop your guitar technique. The video series forms a companion piece to my book, A Guitarist's Guide to Common Chord Progressions, which is available to buy at www.lulu.com should you so wish. However, I hope you'll be able to find some value in the videos with or without reference to the book. In this first video session, we're simply going to explain a few basic technical terms and concepts which you'll need in order to follow the subsequent discussions. And we're beginning with the concept of an interval. An interval simply means the difference in pitch between two notes, whether played consecutively, together in harmony, or indeed as part of a complete chord. If you examine the fretboard of your guitar, you'll see that the smallest interval you have available, at least without bending any strings, is a single fret space on a single string. We call this interval a semitone. Two semitones, i.e. two fret spaces on one string, make one tone, sometimes referred to as a whole tone or simply a tone. So, once again, semitone, tone. And a series of tone and semitone intervals are put together to construct the major scale. Now, the major scale is the foundation stone of the Western European musical tradition. Pretty much everything else can be explained or described with reference to this scale, so it's quite an important pattern to get embedded, to get your head round, and to familiarise yourself with the structure of. This applies to classical and popular music, and includes American styles such as blues, jazz, country, Latin and so forth. Now, the major scale is built from a sequence of two tones and a semitone, followed by three tones and a semitone. So from any given starting note, we go up a tone, a tone, a semitone, a tone, a tone, a tone, a semitone. Once again, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, giving the complete pattern, or backwards. Now, to identify the larger intervals within this scale, we refer to the notes within the scale, or to give them their technical name, the degrees of the scale. In the classical vocabulary, each of these degrees has a name. We're actually going to deal with them by number, except for two. The first note of the scale is called the tonic. The tonic is the note the scale is named after, and for any piece of music written using that scale, the tonic note is the name of the key. So if we start our scale on this note C, the tonic of the scale is C, the scale is a scale of C major, and any tune written using the notes of that scale is said to be in the key of C. Likewise, if we started our scale on the note A, played the same pattern of tones and semitones, the tonic of the scale is A, the scale is the scale of A major, and any tune written using that scale is a tune in the key of A major. The other named degree we're going to refer to at the moment is the octave. The octave is the eighth, last note of the scale, and takes the same note name as the tonic. So in the scale of C, the tonic is C, the octave is C. In the scale of A, the tonic is A, the octave is A. In physical terms, the octave is exactly double the frequency of the tonic note, and this is why they harmonise perfectly and are therefore given the same note name. The remaining degrees of the scale we're just going to refer to by number. So from the tonic we have second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and then to the octave. So the intervals within the scale are named according to the degrees of the scale. So the interval from the first to the second is called an interval of a second. So between the tonic and the second note of the scale we have an interval of a second, which you can see is equivalent to one tone. Now, for those of you already familiar with the concepts of major and minor, we're ignoring minor intervals, minor scales and so forth for the moment, which we will come to in a later session. For now we're acting as if the major scale was all there is. So a second, from the tonic to the third note of the scale we have an interval of a third, from the tonic to the fourth an interval of a fourth, from the tonic to the fifth an interval of a fifth, from the tonic to the sixth interval of a sixth, interval of a seventh, interval of one octave. Here's where it gets a little bit complicated, because if you look at the shape of the scale you'll see that between the fourth and sixth notes of the scale and between the fifth and seventh notes of the scale the interval is the same as that between the first and third notes of the scale. So the interval between the fourth and sixth notes is an interval of 1/3, because it's the same as the interval between the first and the third. Similarly, the interval between the fifth and the seventh notes, an interval of 1/3. So you can see that the naming of the intervals becomes in a way detached from its origins in the names of the degrees of the scale. Similarly, you can see that the interval of a fourth between the tonic and fourth is repeated. We have the same interval between the second and fifth, between the third and the sixth there's an interval of a fourth, between the fifth and the octave an interval of a fourth. Looking at the interval of the fifth, obviously between the tonic and the fifth an interval of a fifth, also between the third and the seventh an interval of a fifth, and between the fourth and the octave an interval of a fifth. So these are the intervals that we deal with in the construction of chords. A chord by definition is any group of 3 or more notes played simultaneously. So the simplest chord we can have consists of 3 notes. This type of chord is called a triad, from the Greek for 3, and the basic set of triads that we can build from a scale is formed by stacking alternate notes of the scale. So if we want to build a chord starting on the first note of the scale, we take the first, third and fifth notes of the scale and play them together. Now obviously you have more than 3 strings on your guitar. If you played that chord you may well be familiar with this shape of a C chord across 5 strings. If you look at the notes you're playing you will see that we have the first, the third, the fifth. The next note is simply an octave above the first, and the next one simply an octave above the third. So although there are 5 strings in play, there are only 3 unique note names being used. So this is in effect a 3-note chord or a triad chord. And you can see that the intervals within a basic triad chord are a third and a fifth. 1, 3, 5. This same principle of stacking alternate notes of the scale can be used to build a chord on any degree of the scale. And this is what we will begin to look at in our next video. Well, we will examine the first of our common chord progressions, the 1, 4, 5 chord progression. Thank you for watching. See you soon.